Hello, Jesse Lee claims that he does not sin. However, he disparages women, black people, and also gay people on his live shows. So that is, in
Well,
fact,
Reverend
sinning.
Augustine,
And
you're
his
saying, yes,
allegations of
Jesse,
sexual.
as a born
5
again
men came
son
out
of
with
God,
sexual
I still
allegations
have
against him.
Satan's
That
nature.
is also
That's what you're
sinning.
That's not at
saying.
all what I'm saying.
Do
So
you
I'm
have
saying
Satan's
as
he
a
is a
sinful
liar.
nature?
I'm
This honest
saying that as a
preacher.
called out Christian, I am so thankful
I
to
know you said
Jesus
all
for the
that, but what
blood
I'm
he
asking,
shed.
just for the record, are you saying that as a born again Christian, you do have Satan's sinful nature or you don't have it?
I'm saying all human
No, we talk
beings,
about
me
you. Do you
included,
still have Satan's sinful nature as a son of God?
I never professed to have Satan's nature in the first place. I am made in the image of God. So there's nothing about me that is Satan
But you
or
used to
satanic
you
in nature in the
sinned as
first
a
place.
son of Satan. You was a sinner, right?
All human
No,
beings
I'm asking you.
inevitably will sin.
And so, as a son of God, you still have Satan's nature, and that's why you sin.
So that's not at all my fundamental thinking. I wanted to unpack for you and kind of compress all those years of school that you talked about. I was trying to compress that into 30 seconds or maybe a minute. I wasn't that good at it. It's so deep, it's so rich. So you got to forgive me for that. But I would fundamentally disagree with the premise that your question is based upon.
So, if you still sin as a son of God, what's the difference between someone who believes in God and someone who does not believe in God?
Let me ask you this. Do you sin?
No,
You don't sin.
no.
Wow.
Because once you
So
are born again of God, you cannot sin. And if anyone says that he has been born again of God and he still sin, he is a liar and the truth is not in him. For that reason, Christ came that you may not sin. You overcome sin because sin is of the nature of Satan. But I
so
want to ask if what's the difference between
I can firmly remember many a commercials with Billy Graham professing his sinful nature as a human and thanking God for Jesus. I can remember many of the other right-wing evangelicals who made the same profession and thank God for Jesus because of human being sinful nature. So it's amazing that you say you do not sin. That's a different category. That's a very different category.
what's the difference between a Christian and a non-Christian if the Christians are still sinning? What's the difference?
So the question I must ask you then is, what is your definition of sin?
No, I'm going to ask you that in a minute, but you didn't answer that question yet. I asked
But it's
twice.
important. In
What
order
is
to
the
answer the
difference?
question,
What is
it's got
it
to be based on a premise,
for
right?
you being a reverend with a degree in it? What's the difference between a Christian and a non-Christian if you're still sinning just like the non-Christian? What's the difference?
So to be identified as a Christian, and there are many different layers of Christianity, many different denominations under the broad umbrella of Christianity, but to identify as a Christian, one must have a fundamental belief in Jesus the Christ. That is a definition of being a Christian. Again, there are many layers within that. As part of my layering, I believe human beings across the board are sinful, inevitably, not might, but will sin. But thank God for God's grace, because of Jesus, human beings are forgiven of their sins.
So you
We try
serve
to do
two
better,
gods. Are
we
you
want to
saying you
do
serve
better,
two
and
gods?
inevitably we will do better. But thank God, because we are human and because we are not divine, we will fall from grace. And thank God for God's forgiveness.
Are you saying you serve Satan and God as a Christian?
Not that into saving, are you?
Whoa, dude.
Money. Because you pay too much for those glasses?
I do not serve Satan. I have no idea where that statement came from. I have no idea where that came from.
Well, when you say you're sinning, all who sin are serving Satan.
So it depends on your premise and your fundamental definition of what a sin is.
What is sin? What type of sin do you commit? What is
What
sin?
type of sin? So you don't commit any sins. Let me ask you this. Is it possible for someone to unintentionally sin, or does it always have to be a deliberate act?
Once you're born again of God, it's impossible to sin.
I
So
have a fundamental disagreement with
what
that
type of sin
theology.
do you commit?
I will respect your perspective. Again, there's no reason to be disagreeable simply because you disagree. I will respect your position, but I must tell you, I fundamentally disagree with
But
that
my
theology.
position is right. It's correct. Yours is wrong.
Okay. And
What
that's fine as long as that's in your mind's eye. That's absolutely fine.
what type of
That's
sin?
absolutely fine.
What type of sin do you commit?
So I think all human beings sin. So I don't think there's anything that's above the fray. I mean, I think there are different levels and different. I think all human beings will inevitably do something that's wrong.
So what type do you commit?
Anything that is not consistent with the perfect, absolute space, holiness of God. Anything that falls short of that, whether it's a personal desire for attention, whether it is a personal desire for affection, whatever the case may be, when you have the least bit of deviance from the perfect state of God, I think you have fallen into a space of sin.
What type
It
of
need
sin do
not
you
be
commit?
stealing. It need not be killing. Sin is such a unintentional thing. All human beings, as part of my theology, will sin.
What
There are
type of
different layers of
sin do
sin,
you commit
but
as a
thank
Christian?
goodness for forgiveness through Jesus.
What type of sin do you commit as a Christian?
I don't know that I would phrase the question like that. What type of sins do I commit as a Christian? Because your
What type of
question
sin are you
presupposes,
committing?
but your question presupposes that because I'm a Christian, I'm committing some sort of sins.
You
And what I'm
said that you
saying is
still
that,
sin. What type of sin do you commit?
what type of sins do you commit?
I don't. So what type do you commit?
I think because I'm human, I'm subject to fail. I'm subject to fault, and inevitably, I think all human beings are subject to do something wrong.
As a sinner,
All human beings are subject to do something where inevitably you'll stop and say, "I wish I hadn't done that."
so what type of sin are you committing?
Maybe today I was on the copy machine and I was so caught up in doing something because I was so strong-willed and focused, and I was making a copy and trying to scan, and I didn't want my assistant to stop, and somebody passed by and spoke, and I waved rather than stopping to speak. I should have affirmed that person was speaking for a reason. That person may have been weak. That person may have been looking for some sort of affection, and they were looking to me as the pastor, as their pastor, but I was so focused on something else that I made a mistake.
And that was a sin?
That was falling short of God's perfect state.
Was that
So
a sin?
for that mistake I made, some theologically may call that a sin, for falling short of the perfect place of God, and something as innocuous as that I just described. I am so thankful that I am forgiven. Once I own it, once I say I'm sorry, God is done with it.
And so you
But
call
all
that
human beings will do something for which they've got to say they're sorry.
So you call that a sin?
I call that something for which I'm sorry, and I recognize some theologies may
But what
drill
I'm trying to
deeper and
find out,
call
are
it
you
sin.
calling that a sin?
Well, it's not. I don't know. Forgive me. I can't think in just those simplistic terms. What I'm sharing with you is that that's something I did that I wish I had a do-over. As I think about it, it was a space that separated me from God's perfect state. Because if I was perfect, if I didn't sin, I would have been able to realize this person was speaking to me at that time because they needed the affection of their pastor. It's COVID-19. There's so much going on out here, and I'm so caught up on something else, I should have stopped. So if that was a sin, perhaps it was because I was too ambitious in doing something else, and I was caught on self and not looking at
Amazing.
someone else.
That's
So it's
amazing.
possible some theologies would categorize that as a sin.
That is
It's something for
amazing.
which, however,
So
I
are
am
you
forgiven.
saying, give me a quick yes or no, are you saying that was a sin when you did that today?
I can't give you a quick yes or no on that because it's too multi-layered when you talk about concepts like sin.
But
It's
you
too
gave me an
multi-layered.
example of how you sinned. So are you saying, yes, that was a sin when you did that?
I'm saying that was a space of separation where I was not in communion with the absolute
I know you
perfect
said all
will
that,
of
but I'm
God.
asking you, was that a sin?
I don't know. I can
Oh,
only
okay.
tell you that's something for which I'm sorry.
So let me
That's
ask,
something that I'm sorry for.